a lot of people, they stop themselves from creating value or offering value to other people because they think that it's like, I don't know anything, I'm not good at anything. So today I want to talk about a mindset belief that I have, which is hustle to help. I think when I look back at all of the incredible things from, raising venture capital from Mark Cuban to spending a week with Richard Branson to growing my social media followers over 1 million people to, being involved in 40 plus companies, 4 of them being billion-dollar companies, all of those incredible, even the fact that I know probably north of 50 different New York Times bestselling authors, I still remember when I read my first book ever. All of those things was on the back of relationships and conversations. And one of them that transformed my life was how I met my wife, Renee. And I get asked this all the time. People want to know, how did you meet your wife? How did you guys meet? And I'll tell you the story because it fits right into this. And I know for some of you guys, you're like, well, I don't know how to create value for other people, so why would they take my call? And I get nervous when I talk to other people. And I came from those same places, okay? I used to write code and I'd sit behind my desk and I didn't want to talk to anybody. And then I realized if I wanted to be successful in business, I needed to learn how to ask questions, how to be curious, how to have a little bit of energy. So no matter where you're starting today, I'm going to encourage you to push forward because it's possible for you. And it could, just like me, transform the person that you meet that literally will shape your life. Back in, this would have been when I was maybe 27, 28, I was at an event on the East Coast of Canada. I think it called Think Something. It was like this interactive digital marketing event in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And one of the speakers there was a guy named Michael McDermott, the founder and CEO of FreshBooks. And I had known of Mike. He was a very well-known Canadian software entrepreneur. This was back in the days of Basecamp and 37 Signals and Ruby on Rails and all this stuff. And he was speaking. So I was excited. And what happened was after he got off stage, we were transitioning the whole group of people, it was maybe 150 people there, to the lunch setup, to where everybody was having, our boxed lunch, sit down and eat. And I just happened to be walking on the path with Mike. And as we were walking, I made some small chat. Hey, I really appreciated your talk. I like this aspect. He's like, oh, what do you do? And I told him, and I just happened to ask him, I said, is there anything that you guys are facing some challenges? And he mentioned something about building kind of a marketplace for payments and invoices. So trying to keep all the transactions on the platform. And I said, well, I actually know somebody, my buddy Stu. He's done this before. He used to work in finance and I can make an introduction. He said, I'd love that. And that's how I got Mike's email. So I went out of my way to offer some help to Mike, and he got my email. And then he actually saw that I was speaking later that afternoon. He must have seen me speak, because what happened was 4 months later, I get an email from Mike asking me if I want to speak at an event that he was helping produce called Mesh Marketing in Toronto. This must have been 2009 timeframe, because it was after Spheric. So I met him then. Maybe it was after Spheric, but I was living in San Francisco and I flew up to Toronto. And when they announced the speakers, I had a bunch of people reach out and say hey, I noticed you're speaking in Toronto. And one of those people was this young lady, okay, on Twitter, and asked me, when you're in town, would you be willing to sit down with me? I'm doing interviews with some of the speakers for my blog. And I was like, of course. Now I click. I look at her profile. I'm like, wow, she's really beautiful. And don't think anything of it, but I'm in Toronto now, and I'm on my way to the Mars Center. If you've ever been to the Mars Center, there's these escalators that go down. And I stopped at a Starbucks on the way. I wasn't too into the health and fitness and high performance back then. I was eating a muffin. I had muffin crumbs all over my T-shirt. I was wearing I was building Flowtown because I had a Flowtown T-shirt on. And I was coming down the escalators, and I could see this beautiful woman that I was supposed to meet at the bottom of the escalator. And I got down there, and I went over and I was like, hey, Renee, I'm Dan, you know, and she kind of brushed me off. I'm not gonna lie. If you ever hear my wife tell the story, she brushed me off. And I thought it's because, like, you know, she really didn't want to interest me. I thought maybe I had something, you know, in my teeth or whatever. But what happened was, and she'll tell you this, not me talking this, I made her nervous. She thought I was a good looking dude, made me feel good. You know, she told me this literally years later and denied that we actually met on Twitter and that she reached out to me first, which are all things that are provable, luckily. I'm just kidding. But I share that story because I still remember, I think it was like 2012, our first son was born. And, you know, when I think back at like all the things that align for me to be in a place to help Mike McDermott, to get invited to speak at an event, to meet Renee, to eventually see my first son born, and then, you know, 11 months later, Noah, my other son. It was just crazy to think that all of that happened because I went out of my way to help somebody. And I think, you know, when I look back on all the cool things that have happened to me in my life that on the surface look like freaking miracles, they were based on relationships. And I want to share kind of like 3 beliefs and mindset hacks that I think will really help you unlock this, okay? Because I think it could transform your life. The first one is to make the offer. Get used to saying things like, how can I help? What are you working on? Is that something that you'd love to talk to somebody in this industry that has experience on that? I remember the way I met Mark Cuban was because there was a guy named Alex Bard who built a company called the Sicily. I'm living in San Francisco. It's 2009, 2010, same time frame. And we had just happened to meet at a coffee shop. Somebody introduced us. Hey, I'm Alex. I'm working on a Sicily. I'd heard of a Sicily. It was a support software. And I think a lot of people in the tech space were using the product. And I just asked him, like, hey, what are some of the struggles you're dealing with? And he's like, oh, onboarding and activation. And I just finished doing a bunch of research for our software, Flowtown, and I gave a talk on lean product development and how to, you know, do activation and all this stuff. And I just made an offer. I said, hey, if you ever want me to come over to your office, sit down with your team and share what I've learned, I'd love to do that for you. And he's like, wow, really? And I'm like, yeah. And he took me up on the offer. And I went down, and I met his co-founders, and I shared everything I had. And, you know, like that is just who I became. It's not where I started, but it's who I became. And it's because I helped Alex. Years later, I'm building Clarity, and we launch our fundraising on AngelList, and Mark Cuban sees that we're mutual connections. And then I actually, I'm not sure if I didn't raise money from Alex. I should have. But you know, Mark reached out to Alex and said, hey, this Dan guy in Clarity, is he the real deal? And Alex said yes. And then Alex told me that he had talked to Mark. And all of a sudden, Mark signed up for the product. And that's how we ended up connecting and getting him involved in the business. And I just, like, every crazy thing that's ever happened in my life happened because of somebody that I connected with, I went out of my way to create value for. And I think that leads me to my second thing that I want to share with you, which is the who, not how. A lot of people, they stop themselves from creating value or offering value to other people because they think that it's like, I don't know anything. I'm not good at anything. And I have seen some of my best friends, not necessarily talented at any specific skill, but just because they're just such kind human beings and people enjoy being around them, that they've created this network. And what I've discovered when I was living down in San Francisco for almost 5 years was that the currency was in your relationships. Being able to help people was not, can I solve the problem? It's, do I know the person who would be perfect to solve this for you? So as you go out through life and you interact with people on planes, you know, at conferences, at a dinner, at a house party, right? I want you to go out of your way to try to be curious about other people so that you can build these relationships and kind of create a mental note of what are they challenged with, so that if you ever run into somebody that seems to be the solution holder for that problem, you can make that introduction, because that is what the world is built on. It's the who, not how. And oftentimes people, you know, and I learned this, I was lucky. Oftentimes people hold themselves back from doing this because they don't feel like they're talented. It has nothing to do with talent. Tim Sanders wrote a great book. It was the first book I ever read, called Love is a Killer App. And in that book, there was 3 premises. And one of those was your network is your net worth. And you want to consume knowledge and experience. And this is the big idea that he taught me at 23 years old, was not even for yourself, but for your customers. Wow. And think about it this way. If you don't have customers, you're not a business owner, what if you read and listened to things for your market, for the people you want to spend time with, for the next level of relationships? When people say you're the average of the 5 people you spend time with, and you're going, well, these are the people I want to become. And my friends right now today, they're not supporting that, but I don't have anything to offer those people. What if you started consuming videos, books, trainings for those people? Because that could be your value add, right? Getting to know the people that created these books and trainings and courses and events, and then being able to introduce them to those people. That is the big idea of the who, not how. And then finally, it's the follow-up, okay? In business, they say fortunes are made in the follow-up. When you build relationship with people, it's not that one interaction. It's not the first time you meet them on a plane that's going to change the game. I met the CEO of Pepsi on a plane flying from Toronto to Kelowna, okay? And that was a crazy coincidence, but did I just leave it at there? No, I asked them, what are some of your challenges? What's going on? And they said around social marketing. I said, I know some people in the space. Let me know. I don't want to send people blindly, so I'll follow up with an email. You can introduce me to somebody on your team and I'll help out. And I made those connections, not for them, but for their team members. But then what I did is I followed up back with them to let them know that I helped them out, because maybe that person was never going to tell them, but really just make myself available as a trusted resource. And guess what? In the future, I was working with one of my companies and they needed a connection to Pepsi. How crazy is that I was able to make that introduction? I'm in tech, but because I look at every conversation as an opportunity to build a relationship and be curious about other people, then I have more context. And so it doesn't matter if it's sending a text message, after you meet somebody, you get their phone number, it's like, hey, give me your phone number and we'll keep in touch, or I'll make that introduction. It could be, sending introductions. That's a great way of following up, and not just introductions at the point to help them, but in the future, thinking about them and then doing a double blind intro and saying, hey, are you cool if I introduce you to this person? They have this really cool technology. This happens to me every week. And that's why I share it. This is literally how I live my life, that has allowed me to kind of hustle through the world by helping other people and create incredible value. And it's just because you become the connector, and it costs you nothing, and it requires zero skill other than being curious and putting yourself out there. But you'll go to an event, meet some people, right? Try to meet 15 new people. Be genuinely curious about them and try to figure out what are some of their challenges. And what I've discovered is while I'm at an event trying to do this, I'll talk to this guy and realize he needs to meet this person. I go, do you know Mark? He's like, no, who's Mark? Mark's at this company and he was just telling me about this thing. You need to meet Mark. Come on, let's go. I'll go meet Mark. I do this all the time. Anybody who knows me has seen me do this in real time. And it is super fun. So that is the big idea. If you go out of your way to help other people, I believe that it could be the most impactful thing to ever happen to your life. And it was true for me, meeting Renee and having 2 beautiful boys and creating an incredible life together. But it all comes back to a quote that I want to leave you with that I learned when I was in rehab at 17. Okay, if you don't know my story, you can Google. I've shared it online, plenty of places. But we had this philosophy, and it went something like, you can only keep what you give away. If you want more relationships, you want more positivity, if you want more supportive, influential people in your life, then give it. The more you give, the more you get to keep. That is the message. I hope this video finds you incredibly well, and we'll be talking soon. Cheers. Peace.